and welcome to today's Women's Health Tech Wednesday. I am your host for today. My name is Ansley Bowen. I'm Associate of Community Development at HITLAB. And before I bring on our guests, I would like to make a few quick announcements. So we have our Breakthrough Alliance Innovators Challenge. Those applications are closing this Friday on May 12th. So make sure you apply if you would like. You can scan the QR code and the link will also be provided in the chat. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring one of these discussions or another HITLAB event like our Innovator Summit or Digital Health Symposium, you can also scan the QR code and the link will also be provided in the chat as well. And lastly, we would love for you to join us for our HITLAB Innovator Summit. It's going to be a 3-day in-person event, June 27th through the 29th at Columbia University. You're talking about the promise and potential of digital health and many other great topics. Again, scan the QR code or also register using the link in the chat. And without further ado, I would love to bring on our guest and welcome our guest, Srishti Gupta, researcher from Penn State University. Hi, Srishti. How are you doing today?
Hi, Ansley. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on. And can you just start us off by giving some introduction and background on yourself?
Sure. I'm a PhD researcher at Penn State University in College of Information Science and Technology. And I do research in human-computer interaction, which is also known as human-centered design or HCI. Yeah, it's a very multidisciplinary field.
No, that sounds super interesting. Can you talk more about your career? Like, what do you do specifically?
Sure. So I guess more broadly, the human-computer interaction research is at the intersection of computer science and technology and psychology and social sciences. So the broad goal of this research area is to understand how people use technology and how to design and develop computer systems that are easy to use, effective, enjoyable, etc. And HCI research, it covers a wide range of topics. So it would be designing user interfaces and evaluation of usability, development of interactive systems, studying human behavior in the context of technology use. And specifically, I do research in environmental sustainability. So I study what kind of technology design interventions can be helpful in making citizens and communities more aware of environmental issues and also provide them with tangible and scientific data-driven ways to contribute to their local environmental conservation and monitoring activities.
Wow. So do you always see yourself doing something like this, or is it something you kind of fell into? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I guess probably not. I wouldn't say I always imagine myself doing this. It's so I have so a little background. I have a master's in software engineering, and I got this degree in India. That's where I grew up. And there are not a lot of HCI research or courses in India, so I was not aware about human-computer interaction while I was there. I guess the engineering or other programs and universities in India are more traditional, not very interdisciplinary. So I guess there are a few people who probably know about HCI, but I guess their knowledge is very rudimentary. Yeah, so I think I learned about HCI during my final year of master's. I wasn't very excited about software engineering jobs, which was my major, and I wanted to work on something slightly different in the computer science field. And I started exploring universities and programs in the US, and I learned about information schools here. And they seemed like a perfect fit for me because information schools, they do a lot of interdisciplinary research, which is grounded in computer science and engineering. So this was perfect for me because I could use my engineering background and do exciting research in interdisciplinary fields without, actually being an engineer.
Right. So can you talk a little bit more about the journey, like where you are now in your career? And can you actually talk more about how it was like growing up in New Delhi and kind of transitioning to being in the United States?
Yeah. I guess so. Now I've been in US for almost 6 years. So I think I can look back and say that my experience and journey, I guess it's been challenging, but also exciting. I would say I've been very fortunate. I grew up in New Delhi, which is a very big city in India. I went to a very small school. It was an all-girls Catholic school. And I say I've been fortunate because I was the only one in my school, in my cohort, to actually leave the city and country for higher education.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I think I've been very fortunate to get that kind of exposure. And I'm working with Dr. Jack Carroll here, who is actually a pioneer in the HCI field. So yeah, I think being a woman growing up in India and getting a PhD in a STEM program in US, I think that's been a big achievement and goal. I think I am happy about it. And I think getting that exposure, especially growing up as a woman in India, it's been critical, but also challenging.
Yeah, no, and that's super inspiring for you to be, the only girl, and that's awesome. So you came to the United States 6 years ago. Was it solely for the purpose of grad school, or was there any other reasons?
It was solely for the purpose of grad school. So I had been looking at PhD programs when I was finishing my master's program, and I was doing research on what kind of universities are in the US, what kind of programs they offer, and especially looking at different professors, because I think that's the most critical part about PhD, is the professor that you would be working with. And yeah, that's how I made my decision to come here.
And also, I believe you did have an internship at HITLAB back in the day. So can you talk about that and how that may have kind of led to a turning point in your life?
Absolutely. So the first time I came to US was for my internship at HITLAB during my undergrad. And I think I should also mention that I was in a 5-year integrated program. So I got my master's and bachelor's in 5 years. And during this program, I got the opportunity to come to HITLAB and do an internship. And I met Stan, who's the founder of HITLAB. And this was my first international experience and exposure. And that's how I got the chance to learn more about universities and education here in the US. And that was definitely a big driving force for me to make this decision to pursue PhD in the US. I got the opportunity to learn more about the schools and programs here. And when I got back to India after my internship, I started to look at programs more in depth and see what would fit my interests.
So, okay, so you came to the United States for a little bit for the internship at HITLAB, and then you went back to New Delhi. And so then you chose to come back to do a PhD. So why did you choose to do a PhD versus another master's program in the United States? Was there a specific reason?
I guess one reason was because I was an integrated program, so I had already received a master's degree. I think going for another master's would have been a slightly easier route to come to United States, but there were, I guess, several reasons. One was I already had a master's. Second, the master's program here would be very expensive. And I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do. And the second reason was I was actually interested in research. So while I was spending my time in India researching programs here in US, I was also working with some of the professors in my school, and I was reading books on HCI research, and I was doing I tried to tailor my master's thesis towards more, human-centered design kind of work. So I think those little research experiences made me realize that I do actually enjoy research. So I think PhD program would be a good choice for me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you actually enjoy research, because I know some people definitely don't. So to do a PhD was obviously a really great choice for you. And I know that you're nearing the end of that journey, but can you explain the application process for grad school, especially what that looks like, being from, definitely out of the United States, and why did you decide on Penn State specifically? Was there a reason why it was, the top school for you versus somewhere else?
Yeah. So the application for grad school, I think one of the key factors is, especially for applying for PhD programs, it's very helpful if you have some kind of research experience prior to joining. So whether you've done some kind of research project in your master's or your bachelor's degree, that's helpful. And because I had done a little bit of that while I was exploring my options, that really helped me get into the program. Unfortunately, I did not know anybody in the US except for Stan when I was applying. So I actually just reached out to I just reached out to professors and some of the PhD students who were working in the labs that I was interested in working. Yeah, so I think it was a very, I guess it was my method of applying was just very brute force, hit and trial. I did not know anybody, so I was just using the internet to learn as much as I can, reach out to people as much as I can. And why did I choose Penn State? Well, I chose Penn State because of my advisor. I think choosing a PhD program is a little different from choosing a master's or bachelor's program. I think because you're working so closely with your advisor, that's really important. My advisor, who's Jack Carroll, his interests, I read a lot of his research when I was applying, and it seemed like a perfect fit for me. And he's a very well-known person in the field. So when I got an offer from him, it was an obvious choice for me. I obviously didn't know anything about Penn State or exactly what it would be like living here or being in this university, but I made my decision based on talking to Jack and reading and learning about his lab. I got to interact with some of his students before joining. So all of those factors helped me make this decision. Yeah.
But that's super inspiring to hear also, because, I've always talked about to someone else that I knew that went to this grad school, or, were able to kind of get references and things like that. But for you to not know anything and kind of just take it, completely and go with it on your own, that's super inspiring. So obviously kudos to you for doing that. And then, can you talk more about the human computer interaction component, also known as HCI? So what does this mean, and what is it about?
Sure. So I think, human-computer interaction, as I said, it's very interdisciplinary research. I think more broadly, as the term suggests, it's about interfaces that connect humans and technology. And when you're doing research in HCI, you're specifically focused on learning more about those interfaces. How do you design those interfaces? How do you develop those interfaces specifically to improve the experience and usability of the humans or people who are interacting with that technology. And this is very broadly speaking. So the reason I think this research area is exciting to me is because you have the opportunity to work in a variety of domains. For example, I'm working in environmental sustainability, so I get to collaborate with a lot of exciting people. I get to collaborate with a lot of nonprofit groups. I get to collaborate with scientists and researchers in environmental science. I've also done work with healthcare researchers. Before this, I worked with people with visual impairments, elderly people. So you can work in a variety of domains. I can talk a little bit about my research to give a better context about what exactly we do.
Yeah.
So I specifically study what kind of technology design interventions can be helpful in making citizens and communities more aware of environmental issues. And I said to help them, give them more tangible and scientific or data-driven ways to contribute to their environmental, especially local environmental conservation and monitoring activities. And this is broadly termed as citizen science. Citizen science is this technique of including citizens who are non-professionals in scientific research. And I study how citizens can participate and collaborate in their local environmental research to improve both the scientific outcomes of environmental sustainability and conservation, and also to help them become more knowledgeable about the scientific aspects of research. And the citizen science, it's very similar to the practice of crowdsourcing, which I think is more well known. But the difference, I would say, is that citizen science provides more agency to the people who are part of the scientific research, as opposed to crowdsourcing, which in my opinion it's more like human sensors providing passive data, let's say through a survey or something. But in citizen science, the difference would be that people are more active collaborators in the research process. So yeah, this is very interesting to me because by being active collaborators, people informally learn about science, about the scientific process. And if you end up scaling this citizen science activity, you end up having a very knowledgeable and engaged and data-driven community. So these are the kind of, I guess, activities that I study, and more specifically, what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the ways that technology interventions can address challenges or amplify practices. Yeah.
No, that sounds super interesting. I mean, personally, I really haven't heard about HCI before. So to hear you talk about it, I mean, I know why you're interested. I definitely get it. But, and then, going kind of back to where you were talking about, how you had some mentors during your journey, especially into your move to the United States. Can you talk about how important that was to not only your career, but most importantly, your life as well?
Definitely. I think especially for me, because I didn't know anybody in the US when I moved here, having some mentors to help me, guide me, was very, very important. I think Stan was probably the first person I got to know when I first came to US. So I think he was a very influential mentor for me. He helped me. I know he's not in the HCI field specifically, but I think there's a lot of UX design and UX research going on at HITLAB, which is very similar to the kind of things I do. So he's been a great mentor to me. My advisor, Jack Carroll, I got in touch with him before I joined the program and after I got my admission. So, he's been an absolutely fantastic mentor. So anybody who's pursuing or who's planning to pursue a PhD, I think my advice would be to choose a mentor because that's going to be a very important relationship in your life. And yeah, I think that it definitely very, very helpful.
Yeah, no, that's so good to hear too, that you were able to have that relationship and that ultimately, helped decide your career and your life. So that's really great to hear that you had that. And, as we mentioned, that you are nearing the end of your PhD journey. So can you talk a little bit about your dissertation? I know that's coming up.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm almost towards the end. I'm going to defend soon, maybe in 2-3 months. Yeah, so I think I gave a broad overview about my dissertation, which is more broadly, I look at HCI research, how HCI can be helpful in improving environmental sustainability. And more specifically, because PhD is all about, studying a very tiny area, I specialize in, so I've been looking at more specifically citizen science groups or people who are involved in these kind of citizen science activities, especially in the area of water quality monitoring. So yeah, I think before I joined PhD, I did not know about citizen science either. So I learned about it when I came here. And interestingly, so I'm in Pennsylvania, and just in Pennsylvania alone, there are more than 300 citizen science groups that are monitoring local water quality.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because obviously every state government in the United States has these specific regulatory guidelines that they are required to follow to monitor water quality, collect data, and make sure that the water that you get in your home is safe for consumption. But I think those regulatory variables are very limited. So a lot of these citizen science groups, they do a very important work of regularly collecting data, monitoring the water quality in the local water system, because there are a lot of other variables that can lead to diseases and pollution, and they make sure and they track that regularly. And a big problem with this was that I noticed during my research was that a lot of these groups, a lot of the data that they collect is under leveraged. And there are a variety of reasons for why, the data that they're collecting is under leveraged. A lot of time is just in some Google sheet lying on somebody's local computer. So it's not being used. It's not being used effectively to help the communities. And I started to explore more about the reasons about this and what can be done to improve. I started studying water quality groups in Pennsylvania locally. And then as my research progressed, I got in touch and I made connections with similar citizen science groups across the US. And I did multiple empirical studies to understand the practices of these groups, what kind of data they're collecting, what kind of technologies and systems they're using to process, analyze data, what happens to that data, and the motivations of these people who are basically volunteers doing this kind of work. And what I found was, a lot of these groups, a common theme across the US was because water is such a regional issue, they're doing this awesome, exciting work, but a lot of them are working in silos or they're working in isolation. So a lot of times, it's like, there are a lot of challenges that they're facing that might be better addressed if they could learn from each other, because there are some groups that are bigger and have more resources and funding and things like that to kind of overcome some of the small basic technological issues or resources. So my dissertation focuses on, I've been working with a nonprofit group and we've been building like this online community to connect these local citizen science groups across the United States. And it's this online community, I call it like a virtual lab to connect citizen science groups. It's kind of similar to virtual labs that professional scientists have. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to create a community, a large networked community of these groups who are doing this work. And there are a lot of goals with respect to the design of these virtual labs and online communities. It's to make their practices more visible, provide them opportunities to connect, share resources, create wikis of different systems and resources that they all can access that they otherwise might not know about. So that's, I guess, broadly what my dissertation is about.
Yeah, no, and that's super interesting that you mentioned the environmental research part, because I feel like many of us often forget how important it is to, have environmental research and also just have like connectivity with that. So the fact that you're working on something to help create more connected, environmental research, that is absolutely amazing. And again, I just really applaud you for your efforts for that, because, not everyone can do that. So I know we're almost close to time, but I do want to get to a couple of questions. So a question in the Q&A said, what would you say is unexpected when a foreign student enrolls in a program like the one that you did?
Oh, good question. What's unexpected? I think, so given like, if you're somebody who like me, who did not know anybody here before applying, I think the unexpected thing would be probably unfortunately being in a lab or working in a department that really doesn't align with your style of working, with your values, mm-hmm. the kind of research you were expecting, because I think from a distance, you can talk to people, have a couple of Zoom conversations, read papers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be the experience that you were expecting to have. So I think because you're working so closely with your advisor, it's good to talk to students and who've been working with that particular professor, that particular advisor. And it's very important to make sure that, you know, your style of working and what you're trying to get out of your research matches with the advising style of the professor.
No, and that's again great advice and a great question to answer. And I just kind of want to end this on, you know, one more like positive note. So what are the most positive things that you have seen while working in research and tech, and specifically environmental research?
The most positive thing, I think more generally, I think my experience has been that my mentors, not just my advisor, a lot of my committee members and other professors that I've worked with have been extremely supportive. And I think the environment, especially in the STEM and the tech field for women, is becoming better. And there are a lot more opportunities. There are a lot more women in HCI research field than there were a couple of decades ago. HCI is a very relatively new field in STEM. It's something that started probably in the 80s. And a lot of the original pioneers were all men. So I think it's good to see that there's a lot more support and there's a lot more visibility and awareness. I think there are a lot more online communities and resources for people, especially young women, to get to know about these programs and the opportunities that they can have.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely still have a long way to go, but with the help of women like yourself, we're definitely progressing towards, you know, being a better environment, a better world. So thank you so much, Srishti, for coming on. I can't believe that we are at time and 30 minutes has flown by. I cannot thank you enough for coming on. And again, thank you so much for sharing your whole journey with our audience.